want to talk a little bit about James Bond and a discussion that's come back up once again because one of the stars of a recent James Bond movie, Quantum of Solace, I guess star would be a little bit of an overstatement. She played Strawberry Fields in Quantum of Solace. Gemma Arterton's talking about how there doesn't need to be a female James Bond, and maybe it's okay to embrace a little bit of traditionalism. And I think it matters because a lot of the discussions lately have been about the idea of passing the mantle of characters from one to the other and whether audiences even embrace something like that. And this is particularly relevant in the James Bond franchise because it's one of the easiest outs that they could possibly have that they, to be fair, have not utilized entirely yet, but they're like, it's just a code name.
Yeah.
The other person can be 007. It could be a woman.
Yeah, the loophole that they would use
is... It's a loophole.
Hey, don't worry, James Bond is always going to be a man. That doesn't mean that 007 is always going to be a man. Why are you so mad? Why do you care so much? So here's what she said. Isn't a female James Bond like Mary Poppins being played by a man? They talk about it, but I think people would find it too outrageous. Sometimes you just have to respect the tradition.
I mean, that quote right there should be put on something and like put that above a studio building, right?
Maybe not even sometimes. You should just kind of always respect the tradition,
right? Like, and here's the thing. The reason why the tradition works is because James Bond is the masculine power fantasy. The man wants to save the day, and the woman wants to be saved by the extremely capable man who saves the day, which is why the movie does well, because it appeals to both men and women, because if you are not a postmodernist douchebag, you understand that men and women are different and get different things from different movies. You don't need to make a female like James Bond. You can have a cool female character that James Bond can either work with or save, and everybody leaves that movie happy. The men get to come out feeling like they would save the day on a plane if a terrorist tried to hijack it, and the women can live with the fantasy of being saved by the ultra-capable spy who looks cool in suits and saves the day. It's not rocket science. It actually just goes back to basic human instincts and the desires men and women have between one another. But because Hollywood is ridiculous and stupid, they constantly want to shift narratives and reinvent the wheel when you don't need to do that.
Yeah,
it's very stupid.
James Bond, not only James Bond, but also 007 as a mantle, that's a character that is inextricable from masculinity. That character has to be a man. But when you try to blur the lines, nobody wins. The women watching don't win, and the men watching don't win. Women don't want to watch a female James Bond movie.
They don't want to watch a female save. The women don't want to watch a female save men. Men don't want to watch a female save men.
No,
it's not a thing.
It's not attractive.
This kind of reminds me of like when female digital artists first started getting into the video game like teams. And you saw like Halo is a good example, right? The brand has been completely destroyed because women writers wanted to create a Halo for a modern audience, right? They changed a bunch of stuff. They refused to play the games. This kind of reminds me of this, where like there's a disconnect between the actual artists and the people who are trying to market it, you know? And these people think, hey, you got to get that, you got to get the women audience, right? They want to feel represented.
Were the Daniel Craig James Bond films waning in relevance and success?
He was just getting old, I think.
Yes.
As time went on.
Yeah,
and they would blame that on...
They were also... Okay, so one of the problems is it was up and down. So Casino Royale is really, really, really good. And I think most people, despite it being a departure from the traditional suave style of James Bond, Martin Campbell brought it back to life post Pierce Brosnan era in a very, very unique way. The cinematography is amazing in that film. Then you get Quantum of Solace. Like I said, I'm the only person in the world who likes that movie. There's probably like 3 other people. If there was an r/Quantum of Solace, it'd be like me and like 2 other people. Okay, all shaky cam, makes you want to vomit. I still love the movie, but more because it's indicative of a time to me that was prior to what we get now, which is Hollywood injected with postmodernism and weird Marxist philosophy, which becomes all of what you see now. Men versus women, all of this stuff. And in that movie, they still have all the stuff you can imagine. It's really funny. The bad guy, he's an environmentalist who helps the CIA with a coup in Bolivia, and then tries to hoard the world's water supply. He's an evil CEO. Just like the... See what I'm saying? Right? Okay. Then you go on, and then it gets really, really good in Skyfall, and people really, really like Skyfall. And then what was the one after Skyfall? It was the one with Dave Bautista.
No Time to Die?
No, the one before that. Anyways,
Another Day.
no, that was from the Daniel Craig.
No.
The point is, it's up and down quality, and it's all over the place. But the problem is, people don't really look at Daniel Craig as the preeminent Bond. In fact, they see him as too touchy-feely, too emotional. He fell in love with Vesper. He falls in love again later. There's a great picture that they use as an example of this where he's they show Daniel Craig on the they show Pierce Brosnan with Michelle Yeoh where he's on the front of the motorcycle and she's on the back and they're handcuffed together. And then they show Daniel Craig on the back of a scooter with Lashana Lynch, and you're like, what could be more indicative of where Hollywood has gone than to see him literally take the back seat?
What's interesting though is because at the
Spectre, thank you.
At the top of this show, we were talking about John Wick Ballerina, right? So it's interesting that you've got two franchises with just a badass dude. One of them saying, "Hey, we can't just have someone else be John Wick, right? Let's keep the world, let's keep the universe, and tell a new story within it." Then you've got James Bond that's like, no, we can't add a new character to the James Bond universe.
Well, they were going to make...
we have to replace James Bond. So
they were going to make that. They were going to do that with Halle Berry. They were going to use the Jinx character from Die Another Day, the one that she did with Pierce Brosnan. It was like the last one in that trilogy. Or in that 4 movies, they thought she was going to have her own film, and then it just never happened, right? But I'll give you an example of why female characters work using the actress that they did here. And she's not even a main character in the film, but in the movie, they send the Strawberry Fields character as like a government, she's like a bureaucrat who's sent to like basically wrangle James Bond and bring him back to MI6 headquarters. And then he charms her, he sleeps with her, he ropes her into what he's doing, and she's killed. So there is a story there that's very interesting and corners into the market of like female interest, female desire. What would be the repercussions of being a woman in the orbit of James Bond? Mm-hmm. I would argue that that is a more interesting story than asking whether Strawberry Fields can shoot an M16.
Well, let's try to steel man the argument. And I want to go back to the loophole that they use to justify the idea of gender swapping, not James Bond, but 007. I found an opinion piece that says, is it really so far-fetched that we see Daniel Craig's James Bond retire? No, it isn't. But if he is leaving, it begs the question, what does 007 mean without the man? A question that is actually quite exciting. The role of 007 has been defined by diplomacy, interrogation, seduction, extraction, and charisma. And then it goes on to say the 007, whether a man or a woman, would have to have gadgets, and that would mean that it doesn't involve physical strength, which a man would have as an advantage over a woman. And technically all of those qualities that they listed wouldn't have anything to do with whether the character is male or female, but they didn't list any of the qualities that you have been talking about just now.
First of all, he's suave.
None of that has anything
suave
to do
doesn't
with
matter. Like women don't
props.
Yeah. Like one of the qualities of James Bond is he's suave, so that he can go in and out of these these high class worlds. Does it matter if a woman is suave? No. If a woman is going to go in and out of those worlds, she has to be seductive. Okay, that's an inversion on what the whole point of the story is.
They're also making the argument that we need this for diversity purposes. Thank you.
Nope.
It says, over the decades, the UK has learned to embrace cultural pluralism.
What does that even mean?
Shut up. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up.
No!
You don't need to do that.
The UK has learned to embrace cultural pluralism and has even made it part of its own national identity. The national dish of the UK
is the new buzzword?
Chicken tikka masala. So if the nation can have an Indian staple as its national dish, why the hell can't it have a black female 007?
Why does it need it?
Lashana Lynch is a British actress, so I don't see the problem here. If she takes up the role of 007, she isn't violating the spirit of the franchise's cultural setting. She's giving us a different aspect of it.
Then you're a different character. Then it doesn't mean anything. The whole point of boring, stupid, postmodern philosophy is to challenge some type of status quo and power structure, but the power structure of James Bond is based around that character, right? If you're just going to ask a bunch of questions, you don't have time to actually tell an interesting story.
Do they even need to make another James Bond? Period.
A lot
I've
of
yet
people
to
are
hear that
asking.
question.
Look, I don't think that matters. Like, I don't think. Do they need to? They don't need to
If
make a
they're
new
having
Jurassic Park either.
Listen, dude, if they're having this much trouble figuring out the future, it does not make me excited
Why
or
can't
hopeful
James
for
Bond
the
be a
product.
fish? Why can't James Bond be a dog? Why can't James Bond be American? Why can't
they
James Bond be
retire?
dead and brought back to life by some type of Haitian spell? I don't fucking know. Ask 10,000 questions, get 10,000 answers. Sometimes something just is what it is, and that's what it's supposed to be.
Well, that's
Okay?
we're going back to we have to deconstruct everything.
Yes, stop deconstructing.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, listen, I mean, it's another sequel, right? So the creativity is gone from Hollywood. Like, that's not happening anymore. They're just going to reboot this again. And why even go down this route? How many times is a project, a reboot, successful versus how many times does it just piss everybody off?
I do not care if they want to reboot, if they continue in the honest portrayal of the character.
But you know
right?
they're not going to. You know that's a far cry.
Well, if they already messed that up with Daniel Craig.
Look, and this thing, people were taken in, right? Because he is very different from past Bonds. He's more emotionally visible, meaning like you see more into who he is as a person because of his relationship with Vesper early on in Casino Royale. But again, that was in 2006. The world was very different in 2006, and people were looking for something different. But now we've had 20 years of something different. People don't want something different anymore. They want traditional. They want it to go back to what it was.
What does that mean? What is like how far back?
That he should be handsome.
Should he slap women again?
Yes.
Should he?
Yes, he should.
Genuinely, would you be pleasantly surprised?
That is not a hallmark of the character. That's one specific example.
But would you be pleasantly surprised, no lying allowed, to see that in the next James Bond
No, because there's no way it wouldn't be done for shock value and as some type of social statement.
But like,
so no,
what
it can't be attached to that.
When, how far back when you're talking about tradition? Because for the last 2 decades, the tradition is Daniel Craig's James Bond. You have a whole generation of people that only know Daniel Craig James Bond.
James Bond
so, like,
is
when
more
does
famous
the
than
tradition...
just Daniel Craig. In fact, the discussion is still who is the best James Bond, not is Daniel Craig
the
best
archetype
James Bond.
is also that dates back further than even the James Bond
Well, that's what I'm asking.
itself.
Like, I know your question was tongue-in-cheek, but I think it's an important question. Like, how far back are we talking? Like Pierce Brosnan days, or even further back?
Look, I love the entirety of the Pierce Brosnan era. I saw somebody mention The World Is Not Enough in there. The World Is Not Enough is a highly underrated James Bond after taking on communism or the fall of the Soviet Union in GoldenEye, and then an evil propagandist media mogul in in Tomorrow Never Dies. He then takes on an anarchist.
I got it. James Bond will save Ukraine.
Yeah.
That'll be the new one.
Played by
Zelensky.
Yeah.
Zelensky for the next James Bond.
For another 2 decades. He's young
Can
enough.
Reignite his
He was an
acting
actor,
career.
yep.
I mean, I see it.
I got to be careful because they'll do it. They'll
just
do it
jinxed it.
too.
They ask consistently why, they say we need to do this for diversity. We need to do this because it means something. No, you don't need to do anything unless it's in service of the story. Everything else that you want to achieve, you could do through creating new characters that do that, but they won't do that because they're also lazy and don't want to try and build new franchises. They want to build off the back of other franchises. They want to stand on the shoulders of giants and then piss on them. Which is annoying.
I do,
stupid.
but you got to realize that, dude, for a lot, especially the new generation of writers and directors that are coming into these rooms, right? All they know is Daniel Craig is James Bond, so they're like, why not? Why not?
Let's
just
that's
be
a
drastic.
big question. A big problem now is like modern writers didn't read classics or really understand literature where these stories were derived from in the past. Now all they understand are streaming shows and the art itself rather than
the
adapting
Marvel
from
formula. Let's make the universe bigger. Let's do 10 sequels.
I will say, do not cast Idris Elba. He is too old. Make him a very cool villain in the next one. He can do a very good villain. They're already trying to make Idris Elba a quasi James Bond in the way they've soft rebooted the Luther franchise with the Luther movie they did on Netflix in 2022. Fallen Sun or whatever it was, where he goes from it being like a detective character study to being like this globe-trotting spy type film. So look, the problem is they're making it more complicated than it needs to be. Telling a solid spy thriller can be done. You're just being interrupted by a bunch of weirdo postmodernists, Marxists, and feminists who want to put modern day ideas into a classic formula.
Who would you like to see as James Bond?
I think Aaron Taylor Johnson is a solid choice.
Is he too big of a name?
Wasn't that disproven?
I don't know. No, I'm saying I think he's a good choice. I don't know if he will be the choice. I've come around. I've kind of reformed my idea. Maybe it's because it's been so long since I've seen Citadel and Wretched. But Richard Madden does have at least the physical look to be James Bond. So he could maybe pull it off with the right script. But no. When it comes down to it, men don't want it.
Yes.
Women don't want it. Nobody wants it. Don't do it. Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.